He didn't just read from the book, he dared whatever was inside to come out. In 1982, a teenage boy named Carlos Trejo cracked open a dusty occult manual in his family's home on Cañitas Street in Mexico City. But he didn't stop at reading it. Surrounded by siblings and friends during a casual séance, Carlos pointed at a passage and spoke the forbidden words aloud, mockingly. They laughed, joked, called it harmless fun, but from that moment on, nothing in the Trejo household would ever be normal again. That night, the air turned heavy. One of the boys, Jorge, suddenly collapsed to the floor, writhing, choking on screams that weren't his. His body convulsed as though something invisible had grabbed him from the inside and was trying to claw its way out. His voice, when it returned, wasn't his voice at all. It was deeper. Hollow, wrong. Carlos stared in horror as his friend's eyes rolled back and blood trickled from his nose. The room fell into a paralyzing silence, broken only by a rasped whisper from Jorge's lips. You opened the door. Over the next few days, things escalated beyond comprehension. Furniture scraped violently across rooms on its own. Crucifixes flipped upside down. The family cat was found mutilated on the front porch, its body twisted into a grotesque symbol. Carlos's younger brother claimed to see a tall figure in the hallway at night, black robe, no face, always watching. And then came the scratches. Each morning, family members woke up with deep, burning welts on their arms, backs, and necks. Some bled through their shirts. Others formed unholy symbols, some ancient, some unknown. A priest was called, then another, and another. All refused to return a second time. One whispered, "You don't need a blessing, you need an exorcist." The house, once filled with noise and laughter, now echoed with unseen footsteps and guttural growls that came from beneath the floorboards. Doors slammed with a force no human could replicate. Objects flew through the air without warning, plates, books, religious icons, all shattered as if hurled by an invisible rage. One night, Carlos awoke to find his sister levitating above her bed. Her eyes stared blankly at the ceiling, mouth agape, her body trembling mid-air. Before anyone could reach her, she dropped like dead weight to the mattress, silent, still, unconscious for hours. That was the final straw. Carlos confessed. He showed the family the book he had used that night, hidden beneath the loose floorboard in his closet. Pages yellowed, brittle, some written in Latin, others in symbols too arcane to decipher. He begged for forgiveness. He begged them to destroy it. But it was too late. When his mother tried to burn the book, the fire wouldn't catch. When she buried it, the ground spat it back out the next morning. They tried holy water, salt, even professional exorcists, but the house resisted every attempt to cleanse it. One priest who visited the home suffered a heart attack at the door. Another screamed during the blessing and ran, never speaking of what he'd seen. The entity had made itself at home, and it wanted more than just fear. It wanted a soul, but which one? And why had it chosen this family, this boy, to begin its reign of terror? Whatever the answer, one thing had become disturbingly clear: the Trejo household on Cañitas Street wasn't haunted. It was possessed. The first time the walls inhaled, they thought it was a trick of the light. Carlos stood frozen in the hallway, eyes wide, as the plaster seemed to pulse, like lungs beneath skin. He wasn't alone. His brother Marco saw it too. The wallpaper rippled in and out, in rhythm, as if the house itself were alive, or something inside it was struggling to get out. Then came the moan, a low, gurgling sound that echoed through the corridor like the death rattle of a forgotten god. From that night on, room 3, the small, cramped bedroom at the end of the hall, was no longer a room. It was a presence. Anyone who entered reported the same thing: suffocating air, sudden nausea, an unshakable sensation of being watched from the corners. But there were no corners. The shadows bent in unnatural directions. Mirrors inside cracked without being touched. The crucifix above the bed? It melted, not burned, melted, like wax under a blowtorch. Carlos's sister, Laura, tried to sleep there once. Just once. She lasted 3 minutes. She ran out screaming that someone was under the bed, but it wasn't a person. When they checked, the bed's underside was shredded, metal springs torn out, mattress clawed from the inside. A foul stench hung in the air, like sulfur and rotting flesh. They tried to air it out, but the stink never left. They sealed the door shut the next day, hammered boards across it, but every night, they'd hear scratching from within. Not mice, not rats, it was rhythmic, calculated, intelligent. They called in a psychic, an elderly woman named Pilar, known in Mexico City for cleansing dark spaces. She didn't even step over the threshold. Her eyes widened the moment she saw the room's door. She whispered one word, Infierno. Hell. According to Pilar, the room wasn't haunted by a ghost, it was a gateway. A spiritual wound, ripped open by Carlos's reckless ritual. And something ancient, something malevolent, had slithered through. She described the force as a parasite, not demonic in the traditional sense, but older. A pre-human intelligence. It didn't torment for pleasure. It fed on decay, emotional, physical, spiritual. The more the family suffered, the stronger it grew. And it was growing fast. Pilar left abruptly, refusing to return. That night, her car was found crashed into a telephone pole. No skid marks, no impact injuries. She was frozen behind the wheel, eyes wide open, mouth contorted in a silent scream. The family tried moving out. Once, packed their things, loaded the truck, but when they stepped outside, the air was wrong. Heavy, thick, electric. Birds circled above the house in frantic spirals. The neighbor's dog, who'd been barking at the house for days, dropped dead in the street. And every box, everyone, was back inside by morning. Unpacked, as if nothing had happened. That was when the phone calls began. Heavy breathing, no voice, just static and an almost imperceptible sound buried beneath it. When Carlos amplified the audio on a recorder, he nearly dropped the device. It was his own voice, recorded during the original séance, repeating the words he had spoken to summon whatever now lived in room 3. But there was something else layered beneath it. A voice that didn't belong to anyone. A voice whispering, again and again, "You are mine." It began with footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling the hallway just past midnight. At first, the Trejo family thought it was each other. Then they started locking their doors. But still, the footsteps came. Heavier, closer, pacing just beyond the reach of any light. And then one night, Marco looked through the peephole of his bedroom door and saw no one. But he heard breathing, loud, wet, like lungs filled with sludge. And then came the knocking. Not random, not desperate, but 3 deliberate knocks, always 3, on every bedroom door, one after the other, just seconds apart. Like a twisted roll call. No one ever answered, not anymore, because they knew, no one was supposed to be in the hallway. Then the apparitions arrived. It was Carlos who first saw them, 2 figures standing at the end of the corridor. Perfectly still, perfectly silent. A boy and a girl, no older than 8. Their faces were pale, eyes black, not empty, wet, glossy. As if reflecting something behind Carlos that he couldn't see. Their heads tilted slightly in unison as he stepped forward. Then they vanished, but they came back. Night after night, the same 2 children. Standing, waiting, never speaking, and every time, they appeared just a few feet closer. Carlos's mother began hearing children laughing in the kitchen. Her husband, who once scoffed at it all, now slept with a rosary in each hand. They stopped using the hallway altogether. They slid furniture in front of their bedroom doors. But that didn't help. One morning, the family found muddy child-sized footprints leading from the hallway to the living room, though it hadn't rained in days. The TV was on, static, and scratched into the screen with what looked like fingernails was a single word: play. Then the dreams began. Laura woke up screaming that the children were calling to her, asking her to come play in the walls. Marco claimed he saw them inside the bathroom mirror, beckoning him with stitched mouths and bleeding eyes. Carlos himself dreamt he was standing at the base of a well, the two children above him, smiling, whispering something he couldn't hear, before pushing him in. When they tried to contact a local priest again, he brought a colleague, an older man who specialized in demonic hauntings. They walked through the house for 15 minutes before stopping in the hallway. The younger priest began to pray, voice shaking. The older priest simply removed his cross and placed it on the floor. "This is not a haunting," he said. "This is an infestation." According to them, these weren't ghosts of dead children. They were mimics, entities that adopted innocent forms to lure, to weaken resistance. Harbingers of deeper possession. They weren't trying to frighten the family. They were trying to belong. And the moment someone acknowledged them, opened a door, spoke their name, followed them into the dark, they'd no longer need to knock. Carlos, gripped by guilt and horror, asked the priest how it could be stopped. But the old man only responded with a chilling certainty. Something came through that night, but it didn't come alone. That evening, the hallway door opened by itself. And this time, the children entered. She started screaming in her sleep, but her mouth never opened. It began subtly. Laura would wake up drenched in sweat, eyes wide, unable to recall what she'd dreamed. Some nights she'd mutter in her sleep, soft and incomprehensible. Other nights, she'd thrash violently, her hands clawing at her own throat as if trying to rip something out. But when she woke, she remembered nothing. Until the morning she walked into the kitchen with her nightgown torn, hair soaked, and barefoot, covered in dirt. She had no memory of leaving the house. Carlos followed her trail that day. The footprints led out the front door, across the street, and stopped at the base of the twisted fig tree where their dog had been found dead 2 years earlier. Embedded in the bark, scratched deep into the wood, was Laura's name, backwards. That evening, Laura began speaking to someone who wasn't there. At first, the family thought it was stress, trauma, a young woman trying to cope with the madness that had infested their lives. But she wasn't just speaking. She was answering, long pauses, nods, reactions of fear, anger, and sometimes, laughter. Low, raspy, not her own. She stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stared for hours at the boarded-up door to room 3. Carlos once found her with her hand against it, eyes shut, whispering something repeatedly. "He says I'm the one. He says I'm ready." Ready for what? No one knew, but they felt it. The shift. The house, once chaotic and aggressive, now seemed to settle into a vile calm. The kind that comes right before a storm hits. One night, the family heard Laura screaming from her room, except it wasn't her voice. It was deep, male, monstrous. They burst in, only to find her levitating 3 feet above her bed, limbs rigid, face contorted into a grin too wide for her jaw. The crucifix above her shattered. Books flew from shelves. The windows cracked in unison. Carlos rushed forward, but Laura turned to him mid-air, and whispered his full name. Not just Carlos Trejo, but his middle name, his childhood nickname, a secret only his late grandfather used. Then she fell. The doctors found nothing wrong with her. Physically, she was fine. But her EEG scan, measuring brain activity, showed 2 distinct wave patterns. As if someone else was sharing her mind. The priest returned. He brought holy water, incense, relics. But the moment he entered the house, Laura began to scream. Not in pain, in rage. Her voice thundered in tongues. She hurled furniture with unnatural strength. Her eyes rolled back. Blood poured from her nose and ears. When the priest placed the crucifix on her forehead, it burned her skin. The priest declared it full demonic possession. The ritual was scheduled for dawn, but the entity had no intention of waiting. That night, Laura disappeared. Her window was open. No signs of forced exit. No footsteps. Nothing. Just a single word, written in red across the bedroom mirror. Mine. Carlos dropped to his knees. The girl he had sworn to protect, his sister, his blood, had been taken. Not by death, but by something that had been watching since the very beginning. Carlos could still hear her voice, though she was nowhere to be found. At first, he thought he was going mad, faint whispers echoing from the walls. A soft, Carlos, drifting up through the floorboards at night. It wasn't imagination. The entire family heard it. Laura was gone, but she was still inside the house. And then the dreams returned. Carlos found himself standing in the hallway again, always the hallway. Except this time, the door to room 3 was wide open, bathed in a pulsing red glow. From within, he could hear a low chant, voices layered atop one another, male, female, child, ancient. In his dream, he stepped forward, and just as he reached the threshold, he saw her. Laura, kneeling, her face emotionless, eyes empty, her hands cupped around a flickering flame that hovered in the air, untouched by wind or reason. And behind her, the thing. A silhouette with too many limbs, too many faces. Constantly shifting, like a kaleidoscope of pain. And it was watching him. When Carlos jolted awake, his nose was bleeding. The sheets soaked in sweat. His hands were burned, exactly where he had touched the flame in the dream. He didn't tell the others. Not yet. Instead, he returned to the floorboards where he had once hidden the book. The cursed, unreadable thing that had started it all. But the book was no longer there. What he found instead was a hole. Carved deep, like a makeshift tunnel. Dirt, splinters, bone fragments, pieces of candle wax. A child's shoe, Laura's. And beneath all that, something that hadn't been there before. A crude altar. Made of bricks and rusted iron. At its center, a dish filled with what looked like dried blood and a clump of Laura's hair. Etched into the wall above it was a spiral symbol, identical to the one that had appeared on his own skin after the séance years earlier. This wasn't just a haunting. It had always been a ritual. The priest, when called again, confirmed Carlos's worst fear. The entity wasn't possessing the house randomly. It had been summoned, yes, but it needed a vessel. A soul that could serve as an anchor. And Laura, emotionally raw and spiritually vulnerable, had become that anchor. But the possession was incomplete. To fully cross over, the entity needed a final offering. A soul willingly given. A sacrifice. That's why it kept whispering. That's why it was calling Carlos. Because he had opened the door. He was the original conduit. And now, it wanted him to finish what he started. The priest warned him. If you give in, even for a second, you won't be offering your soul. You'll be unleashing that thing upon the world. Carlos was silent, but that night, he returned to the altar alone. He didn't tell his family. He didn't want them to stop him. All he carried was a lighter and Laura's childhood rosary. In the darkness beneath the house, the whispers grew louder. A vortex of sound that felt like it was tunneling into his skull. Carlos, you can end this. Bring her back, trade places. He stood at the edge of the altar, lit the flame, held the rosary, and then, as the red glow returned, he spoke. Just 3 words, then silence. The ground shook, the walls screamed, and the house began to breathe again. When the neighbors finally entered the house, it was silent. Too silent. No birds, no dogs barking, no humming appliances. Just a heavy, hollow stillness that wrapped around the walls like a shroud. The front door creaked open on its own. Inside, the lights flickered once and then died. The Trejo family was gone. No signs of a struggle. No blood, no packed bags, no signs of exit. Every personal belonging remained. Shoes by the door, dishes in the sink, a still warm cup of coffee on the table. It was as if time had simply stopped. But in the hallway, something had changed. Room 3, once sealed and boarded shut, was now wide open. No glow, no sound, just darkness. A kind of darkness that didn't just fill a space, it devoured it. The police arrived, then the press, then the priests. But none had answers. Carlos, Laura, Marco, their parents, vanished. The priest who had last spoken with Carlos refused to enter the house. He merely stood outside, trembling, whispering that the boy made a trade. But he wouldn't say what kind. Wouldn't say with who, only that the sacrifice had been accepted and sealed. Days passed, then weeks. The house was declared abandoned, but it was never empty. Neighbors began reporting voices at night, children laughing behind the walls, lights in room 3 flickering on without power. One man swore he saw Laura through the upstairs window, just standing there, smiling, her eyes completely black. And then there were the knocks. Always at 3 a.m. 3 knocks. Always 3. When investigators finally searched beneath the floorboards, they found something new. The altar had been destroyed, but in its place, a fresh spiral. Carved into the soil, still wet with something dark, and resting atop it, a photograph. The entire Trejo family, all smiling, all dressed in white, all standing in front of room 3. But here's the thing, the photo was dated 2023. Over 40 years after they vanished. No one had lived in the house since. But the photo was genuine. Experts verified it, the paper, the ink, the timestamp. And most disturbingly, Carlos looked exactly the same. Unaged, untouched by time. There was no explanation, no evidence, no closure. The authorities eventually sealed off the house, welded the doors, covered the windows, declared it condemned, but still, passers-by swear they hear whispers coming from within. And if you knock on the front door, just once, you'll hear nothing. Twice, still silence. But on the third knock, some say you'll hear laughter. Others say you'll hear footsteps. And some claim they've heard Carlos himself, whispering from the other side of the door. The door was never meant to close. They call it Mexico's most terrifying haunting. But for those who know the truth, El Caso Cañitas wasn't a haunting. It was an invitation, and someone accepted.